That is so scary. The eyes are like, the eyes would.
That might be the clearest apparition photo I've ever seen.
Amityville, New York. A place where reality and legend blend into a tale of unspeakable horror. This story is the inspiration for numerous Hollywood adaptations. In the dead of night, Ronald J. DeFeo unleashed unspeakable horrors upon his own family, brutally gunning down 6 innocent family members as they lay asleep. The echoes of that tragic night still linger.
Anytime a tragedy occurs on a land or in a home, it's leaving behind a massive imprint, a memory. And the memory can be really charged, especially when we're talking about a whole family being murdered.
The Lutz family moved into the house shortly after the murders occurred. The father, George, he went outside and it was late, it was nighttime, and he looked up at the window and he thought he saw his daughter stood there, and behind her it looked like a human with a pig face.
No thanks.
Yeah.
Get ready to face the unknown, because in Amityville, the ghosts of the past never truly sleep.
That is terrifying.
But before we start, make sure you head over to my Patreon at Jack Osbourne, become a member of my community. There's extra footage from the episode, there's behind the scenes pictures, we're gonna be dropping merch, and there's a whole bunch more that we're gonna be rolling out over the next few months. Like clip submissions, that's when you send in your paranormal evidence and we review it. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and now I present the Amityville Horror.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Jack Osbourne.
I'm Cindy Kaza.
All right, so we are going to be diving into the Amityville horror case. Now, for viewers at home, listeners in your car, wherever you are, this is a trigger warning. There's some discussion of gore, violent death, what have you. Just be aware. So the origins of the Amityville horror case start with the DeFeo family. The eldest son went on a rampage one night and brutally murdered his entire family. Both his parents, both his sisters, both his brothers. Shot them in their beds while they were face down. He never gave a real reason. He turned himself in, he said, and after he did it, he ran to a local bar and was like, I think someone shot my family. It was him. He went to prison for the rest of his life. He pled insanity to try and, go to an institution instead of a prison. It didn't fly. So he did 6 consecutive life sentences. And he died in 2021. The Lutz family moved into the house shortly after the murders occurred. They claimed they bought the house with no knowledge that there were these horrible grisly murders that occurred. In the 28 days that they stayed there, all hell broke loose. Quite literally. Furniture was moving, green slime was coming out of the walls. George Lutz, the father, he kept waking up at 3:15 in the morning every day. One time he woke up and he was pinned to his bed and he looked at his wife and she looked like an old lady. There were glowing red eyes that people would see from outside, looking at the house. At one point, the house yelled, "Get out," when they were trying to cleanse it. So there was a fair share of stuff. Mm-hmm. So why are we picking this one? In recent years, it's so funny with the Amityville horror story. It's like every 5 years it comes up again in the press. Mm-hmm. Was it real? Wasn't it? What's the truth? Oh, this person's come forward. It's just floating around. And they've made 16 adaptations of this story into movies.
It's crazy.
I would argue that it's probably the most famous American ghost story.
I mean, look, I remember being a kid and being so terrified every time I saw a picture of the house with those 2 windows. I mean, you can't forget the windows on the top of the house. So is it scary? Scary story.
Very scary. The big question with the Amityville horror story is there truth to hauntings in locations where a horrific crime scene occurred?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For a number of reasons. When you have a tragedy where there's a lot of bloodshed, people are murdered, that leaves a really deep psychic imprint or memory left in the building. So that by itself can create activity.
Yeah.
Then you have potentially the spirits or the people that died in the home too. Right? And then if you have those two things combined with an agent giving off PK energy, you have the possibility of a lot of poltergeist activity.
But didn't they also say, though, that there's like demonic shit with it as well? Like it's not just a poltergeist. Wasn't there? I remember hearing something that they thought occult activity was going on in the house at one point. And
I mean, let's be real. I feel like there are a lot of stories about this case. There are pieces of the case that I am really skeptical about. And I also think that there was paranormal activity in the home. It's just really hard to know what's what.
So we're gonna break this down by talking about what happened with DeFeo Jr.
Right.
And then we'll go into the Lutz family and what happened with them with their experiences.
Great.
All right. So, as I said, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his family 1974, November 13th, at the Amityville house.
And some people believe his sister helped him. I just want to throw that in there.
Oh.
There's some people believe that his sister also shot some of the family members and then he shot his sister. I mean, there's all these different accounts because he changed his story so many times. But nonetheless, the whole family was killed.
And didn't he murdered them while they were sleeping?
Right.
And then positioned all the bodies face down in their beds.
I think that's what some people say. I mean, there's so many different accounts of what actually happens.
Yeah.
But from what I, read and watched on some of these documentaries, the sister's body received like the worst
Brunt.
It seemed that way from what I read. Anyway, yeah.
So this guy shoots his whole family.
Yeah.
Goes running down the street to a bar and yelling, "You gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot." You think? Who could have shot them? DeFeo and a small group of people went to 112 Ocean Avenue, which is the Amityville Horror House, and they found his family dead. So he killed his entire family. Ronald DeFeo Sr., Louise, and that's his parents, his sisters Dawn, who was 18, and Allison, 13, and brothers Mark, who was 12, and John Matthew, the parents receiving 2 gunshot wounds, and the children were given 1 gunshot wound.
Well, here's the thing, too. DeFeo Jr. and his sister Dawn both despise the parents. So that's like common knowledge. The sister Dawn really despised the parents, too. And apparently somebody remembers her saying, I think maybe she wrote it down somewhere like that, one day the parents are going to be dead or he's going to kill the parents. I don't know. There's all these accounts of people hearing her say she hates the parents. Like, it was not a surprise. So that's why some investigators really believe that he didn't act alone.
But he killed his sister.
I know.
So that she, joined in and then all of a sudden, I wonder if it was going to be like a murder-suicide type thing.
I mean...
And then he just was had second thoughts after he smoked his whole family.
Well, there's a lot of information, I think, out there that is conflicting, right? You have to decide which one do you believe.
Yeah.
But he changed his story so many times that it's what actually happened. And he was on LSD or something, or who knows.
Well, that leads into the verdict of what happens. So he gets arrested, goes to trial. October 14th, 1975, so a year later, he and his defense lawyer pled insanity. And DeFeo claimed he had no memory of killing his family, and it was pure insanity, and he was trying to get the insane way out. Could it have been possession?
In this case, I think it's just straight up, the guy is an addict, I guess he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. There's a lot of trauma in the family. The sister was traumatized. The dad was abusive. Not seeing possession. I think it's just yeah.
Well, there was his insanity plea was backed up by a psychiatrist that said, like, no, this guy is fucking crazy.
Well, I mean, that's common. You have the defense gets the psychiatrist and the...
It's a good point. Good point.
Look, could something like this happen? Could somebody be possessed and then go on some sort of a killing rampage? Yes, I suppose that's possible if you're dealing with something demonic. But in this particular situation, I think we're dealing with somebody who just has a personality disorder, who's an addict, who, grew up in a family where there's a lot of trauma and snapped.
Mm. Well, the flip side, that is essentially what the prosecution said. Like, this guy has a personality disorder, he's a drug user, and he absolutely knew what he was doing when murdering his whole family. Mm-hmm. Weird one. I guess it does beg the kind of age-old question of when you hear stories of people just snapping and doing this kind of thing, sometimes you go, that just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, it's Jack Osbourne here, and this episode of Ghosts and Grit is sponsored by Zocdoc. Ever find yourself stretching the truth with that aunt at a family gathering? The one who grills you about your love life, career, and why you're still living at home, and you somehow find yourself bending the truth just a little bit? Well, when it comes to discussing personal stuff, Zocdoc ensures you won't need to bend the truth. Find doctors who really listen and understand, backed by real patient reviews. With Zocdoc, you can feel comfortable with being honest. Zocdoc is the best. It's a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. Look, I use Zocdoc and you should too. Go to Zocdoc.com/GG and download the Zocdoc app for free. Find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/GG. Zocdoc.com/GG.
So on November 21st, 1975, DeFeo was found guilty on all 6 counts of second-degree murder. On December 4th, 1975, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences of 25 years to life.
It's interesting, second-degree murder, which means it was not premeditated. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, maybe the argument was it wasn't premeditated. He was in some kind of drug haze.
Right.
And just grabbed the gun and was like...
lost his mind.
Like you just said, there's space aliens in my bedroom. Like, I'm going to go blast them.
Right.
So, yeah, he went to prison where he died at the age of 69 on March 12th, 2021.
During the pandemic.
Wow. Oh, interesting. Tragic story, ultimately. The first part of the Amityville.
Absolutely. I mean, look, all these kids were killed. That is it's a huge tragedy. I mean, the parents too, obviously. It's just, the whole thing is a mess.
Yeah. This takes us to the Lutz family. Mm-hmm. So, Kathy and George Lutz moved to what is now famously the Amityville Horror House because it was cheap. They paid $80,000 for this house. It was a relatively big family, 3 kids. And they thought it was a great opportunity. Like, here's a cool house. And totally unaware of the history of the place. Which... But then again,
I don't know about that. This is one of the most publicized mass killings, probably during this time in this town, in this house. I think the realtor would probably be like,
by the way,
don't you have to disclose that sort of thing when somebody's buying a house? I mean, I find that piece a little bit hard to believe, but whatever. What do I know?
So this nice family moves into this house. They think they're getting a good deal. It's beautiful. And shit goes haywire. They start hearing doors slamming, banging on the walls. Green slime starts appearing out of the walls and stuff, which is very odd. And it just ramped up. It got crazier and crazier as time went on. And we'll dive into all those juicy details. So when all this stuff started happening, George, who was a non-practicing Methodist, and Kathy, who was a non-practicing Catholic, both reached out to like folks of their own faith to be like, hey, come bless this house. When they went to have these blessings done, shit got kind of weird. When the priest came, not only did the house yell, get out, but the priest's hands began to bleed.
Sounds like the stigmata. Where did they bleed? Where Jesus was crucified?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm serious. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever investigated a case where someone randomly began to bleed from the hands?
Absolutely not. But in the Catholic, religion, there is a phenomena called the stigmata, where people who are very devout and are in a lot of prayer, there have been accounts of, them bleeding in the same areas where Christ was nailed to the cross. What's interesting about the stigmata is if you read about earlier cases, people reported to have bled from this area, from the palms. But when people realized that's not anatomically possible, like if Christ were crucified through the palms, he wouldn't be able to hold his own weight. Yeah. So then they realized, it was through the wrists. And after that, idea came out, then when people had the stigmata, they started bleeding through the wrist. So how is the psyche contributing to the manifestation of this blood? Is it psychosomatic? Is it paranormal? Is it all of the above?
Yeah. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. What would you do if you heard audibly? I'm sure you have heard it
I've heard it on EVP, and I've heard it intuitively and through EVPs. I have not heard a disembodied voice say, get out. But what would I do if I heard a disembodied voice say, get out? Would probably get out. I mean, later, But, okay, in their defense, calling in somebody from the clergy to bless the house seems like a smart idea. But again, if you're non-practicing, then if you don't actually believe in practicing, Catholicism or being a Methodist, then how is it going to work? Because I think you have to believe in it for it to work.
Yeah.
Or you have to have some kind of a faith in it,
Especially, listen, I don't know. I would like to think, though, that having these experiences would drive you closer to faith. If you...
Yes.
Because you're like, wait a minute, there's got to be something to this. This isn't... Mm-hmm. This is a real thing happening.
Mm-hmm. I'm a believer that if you see something really dark or you have this really dark experience, it's an opportunity for you to go into the light or to seek out the light. So it doesn't have to be all bad. It's terrifying, but it's what you do with it. And a lot of people don't do anything with it. They dismiss it, they pretend it's not real, and then they keep having the experiences. Or they call in clergy, and they don't believe what the clergy is actually doing, so it pisses it off or it makes it worse. You have to have faith in what you're practicing in order for it to work, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense, because then it's all energy.
Right.
So you want to believe the energy pouring into it is worth a shit. Yeah. So some of the things that were happening were doors were slamming, beds were moving on their own. Right. Strange smells all throughout the house.
Yep.
For some reason, the house was always cold. They could never heat it. They couldn't figure that out. That's a weird one.
Well, to me, this is like classic poltergeist activity. The green slime is interesting. That's interesting. I've never seen that before. This is the only case where I've heard of that happening. Not sure what that is. Again, if we're dealing with something demonic, can something like that occur? Absolutely. I think with demonic entities, demonic forces, anything's possible.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people said that the green slime coming out of the walls at the Amityville Horror House was a manifestation of pure evil. Do you think that's what pure evil looks like?
No. I don't think pure evil looks like green slime, but I didn't see the green slime. I wasn't there. I think it's interesting, right, that they call in clergy from both of their religions. Neither of them are practicing these religions to bless the home, right? Because they heard about the murders that happened. So this is before the anything happened, right? Any paranormal activity happened, right? So then they come in, they bless the home, then everything amps up. In my opinion, you have to actually believe in the blessing in order for it to work.
Yeah.
Neither of them were practicing any type of Christianity at the time, right? So what's the point? Of course, like, it's going to piss it off. They don't even believe.
They're just covering their bases.
Right? But again, it's
like lip service, literally.
Right. Yeah.
But then again, I think if you're scared, you're gonna be like, all right, fine, bring in anyone. Like, I'll all of a sudden become a practicing Catholic. Like, if I started having green slime come out of my walls, I may pick up a Bible.
True. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Have you had a paranormal experience that made you question your faith or understanding with a higher power?
Well, let me put it this way. I've always believed in a higher power. I believe in God. Do I believe God is this human form? No. I think God is kind of beyond our complete comprehension. This is my belief. Yeah. Have I had experiences that have challenged my faith in a higher power or God? No, because I just feel sure that something beyond our comprehension exists. I've always had that deep faith, which is why I don't walk into investigations from a place of fear most of the time, right? I go in thinking, okay, I'm protected. It's okay. Now, the concept of like heaven and hell is challenging, right? Because that's kind of put on us. There's heaven, there's hell, there's this, there's that. That has been challenged. My understanding of the afterlife and how it works has been challenged many times. So I've had to really kind of be open to all of these different ideas. Like, what is actually happening when I'm communicating with spirit, right? There are a lot of different possibilities. And I think that, actually, let me say this. When I teach mediumship, I tell my students to always remember, just because something hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it's not real, right? Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not real. Because what happens is people get like super set in their ways about what's possible, what's not possible, and all that stuff. And then they assume that this couldn't be possible. Like green slime. I'm like, I don't know. I've never seen green slime. Maybe there was green slime. Maybe it is the demon coming out in green slime. I wasn't there. But I think it's important to always be curious and open.
Yeah. I think that's a great, think about most things, to be honest with you. It's just a good outlook to have.
Yeah.
Especially when it's something that we truly have no understanding of. And I don't think we're meant to.
I agree.
I think you're meant to feel like a connection to it, but not a true, deep, through and through understanding like you would of what does 1 + 1 equal.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is school. Like, we're in school. So you can't have all the answers to the test while you're taking it.
Yeah. That's a good point. All right. So George said he would wake up every night at 3:15 in the morning. And that allegedly is the same time that the previous owner killed his victims.
That makes total sense. I mean, I've heard of this happening many times where people are living in a house where somebody passed away. They know what time the person passed away and they're waking up at that time. You know, and I think people don't always understand how subtle spirit communication can be. We think that it has to be the spirit, a full body apparition in front of us. It has to be, staring at us for it to be real. And actually, the spirit world communicates in a lot of different ways. And so the fact that somebody's waking up at the time the murders occurred could be a spirit just trying to give information like, this is me, right? And we think like, why is this happening? And it's way more subtle. There doesn't always have to be this like burning bush.
Yeah. Well, George did have kind of like a burning bush moment though, because he gets help. He wakes up at 3:15 one evening and he feels like he's being held down on his bed. Can't move. Classic kind of sleep paralysis. We've spoken about this. And he felt like it was some unforeseen force. He also woke up to see his wife transform into like an old woman levitating over the bed.
That's terrifying. What would you do if you saw that? If Aries showed up as an old woman levitating over you in bed at night?
I would be pretty freaked out. I think I would start by being like, what the fuck? I would think she was like fucking with me, and I was like, I don't know. It would freak me out. But I can relate. I've woken up and seen an old woman stood over me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and then again, like I think I said this to you before, my husband woke up and heard me speaking in a man's voice in a foreign language once.
Do you know what language?
He didn't know. He said it was like a really old language. I have no recollection of it. Can you imagine? They sound like a man talking.
Tongues?
Maybe. Who knows? Well, talking in tongues is, you're channeling the Holy Spirit's language, right? So that's, again, mediumship, though. This is the thing. Anytime you are connecting to an unseen energy in another realm and it's channeling through you, it's technically mediumship. Mediums are intermediaries between this dimension and another dimension. We just might be doing different things and calling it something different. Still mediumship.
Well, that's any go-between between our world and the spirit world. I mean, the Pope is a medium. A pastor is a medium. A rabbi is a medium. If you think about it, because that's the go-between, the perceived go-between.
Yeah, right.
So, something that I do want to, I haven't addressed yet, but the Lutzes were only in the house for 28 days before they ended up getting the fuck out of there.
That's a very short period of time.
Very.
And that doesn't make sense, right? That doesn't seem logical. If the activity was all fake, why would you only stay in a home for 28 days that you just moved into?
Yes.
So there had to have been, in my opinion, paranormal activity. To what extent, that's what we're trying to understand.
There was these red eyes that were seen looking out the window on one occasion. The family... I saw something about the father, George, said he went outside and it was late, it was nighttime, and he looked up at the window and he thought he saw his daughter stood there, and behind her it looked like a human with a pig face.
No thanks.
Yeah. And when he went in to be like, what the fuck's going on, he went in the bedroom, she was fast asleep. Shortly thereafter, his daughter said that she made a new friend who's a pig.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about demons, because oftentimes people will think they're seeing a child spirit and it's actually not a child.
Yeah. Yeah, well that always freaks me out.
That's so terrifying. It's like
when I've done investigations and it's like, oh, it's a small child.
It's like, is it?
You're like, why is there a small child in a prison? Like,
yeah.
Little 8-year-old boys I don't think were sent to, hardened state penitentiaries.
No.
Now, do you think that the house was haunted because there was a murder there, or do you think the murders opened up some kind of gateway?
Both. It can absolutely be both things. Because anytime a tragedy occurs on a land or in a home, it's leaving behind a massive imprint, a memory. And the memory can be really charged, especially when we're talking about a whole family being murdered, right? So even if there wasn't an intelligent haunting, which I think that there absolutely was, a psychic medium could go into the house and pick up on all of the murders and feel the energy. And sometimes, honestly, it's hard to discern between imprinting and intelligent haunting. So that force alone, that has a lot of power. And we have, I believe, some fragments of the family left behind, some that are interacting with the family. And then we also have something that's super dark, right? Like, who knows? Did it open up a portal? Did something come in at that moment? Could very well be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Now, I remember hearing something that I know we mentioned this earlier, that there was a theory that there could have been occult activity in the house previous to the Lutzes moving in. So something the DeFeos were fucking around with, or DeFeo Jr. had dabbled in, which, in turn caused him to become possessed and then brutally murder his family and, you know.
I mean, I don't know if I buy that, but what I will say is this. When people are really out of their bodies, out of their minds, in his situation, he was on a lot of, LSD, he was doing heroin, he was drinking a lot. So when you're in that state, you're out of your body and you can have cracks in your aura and things can get in. It can invite things in. So it is possible that something like that happened. Do I think that he was doing black magic? That's not the feeling that I get. You know?
Have you investigated the Amityville?
I have not. It's hard to get into. I think it's like they don't let a lot of people in.
Really?
Yeah. It's really hard to get into.
For the longest time, I would get the Conjuring House and the Amityville Horror House confused.
Yeah, the Conjuring House you can get into, but the Amityville Horror House is really, really hard to get into. I don't even think they let people in to do investigations. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, to that point, after the Lutzes moved out, they ended up having a local TV crew come and do some paranormal investigating to figure out what the fuck's going on. They brought in some psychics, and the psychics determined that it was demonic, whatever was there. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I want to know how and why and what was the evidence.
Yeah, look, this case is so it's a tough one for me because I think that some of the evidence was fabricated or maybe blown out of proportion. I think I also have to look at the movie, how that movie was terrifying, and I think it was blown out of proportion. And from that, it makes it really hard to know what's what. And then you start to question all of the things that happened in the house, right? So what is actually real?
Yeah.
I think it's compelling that Danny came forward all of these years later to say, hey, look, like nobody believed me. This activity happened. I saw things. What's his purpose, right? What's the intention? I don't feel like it's a money grab necessarily. And I think that it's hard for kids because children are very open and kids have experiences all the time. And then people tell them, you're imagining it, it's not real. And then they feel ashamed and then they feel embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it. So I think we need to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I do think as parents, maybe loosen things out of proportion. Yeah. And that's not his fault, right? That's not his fault.
No, not his fault at all. The Warrens. The Warrens turned up at the house after the Lutzes had moved out.
Right.
And they investigated it. And I think they really put it on the map.
They did. They totally did.
And they had some pretty significant things happen. Ed Warren was seemingly pushed to the ground at one point. And Lorraine claimed to have visions of the murder scenes and the bodies and deceased children.
But that's not surprising to me.
Well, yeah, because she was a medium, wasn't she?
Yeah, that would be very normal for a psychic medium because, again, that house has the imprint and the memory of those murders in it. So anybody who's tapped in can walk into that house and pick up on everything that happened. And if you are very psychic, you could literally see where everything happened, what happened, who did it. And that's the memory. That's not even necessarily mediumship. That could just be psychic imprinting. That's not unusual, in my opinion.
Is it? Do you find it hard as a psychic medium when you are investigating a location that is the scene of a really violent murder and you see those images? Does that fuck with you ever? It's
really tough. So I filmed a couple of shock docs where I had to investigate the childhood homes of serial killers. I did Danny Rolling and I did Ed Gein, right? Both of those cases were particularly challenging, not because I was, necessarily at their homes, but because psychologically I could be in their minds. Like that really messed with me, especially Danny Rolling. And also seeing all the trauma. I mean, it's a tough. Anything that messes with your mind and gets in there like that. I mean, I would much rather see a full body apparition than deal with the psychological aspects.
Did you feel like any the spirits of the killers ever came to you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
And with Ed Gein, the mother was around a lot too, and in his case, his mother was super abusive. So he grew up with a massive amount of trauma, and then became totally psychotic and did a bunch of really terrible things, which several horror movies were based off of, right? But there's so much to a case. So, I mean, going back to Lorraine, seeing the bodies and seeing the murders, that to me is very common. That she should see that if she's a true psychic medium. Yeah.
What do you compartmentalize it when you're having those experiences?
You have to, in a way, right? I can't get so attached emotionally to any of it because my job is to really try to show up from the most neutral place possible so I can really see what happened, right? If I'm too emotionally invested, then it's hard for me to do my job. I get swayed one way or the other. It's hard to do that, to show up in a neutral way, but I always try.
All right, so let's take a look at some evidence. Okay, this is a very famous photo. It was taken...
that's so creepy!
Gene Campbell... in 1976, during the investigation with Ed and Lorraine Warren. That little boy was not there.
That is so scary. The eyes are like, the eyes would.
That might be the clearest apparition photo I've ever seen.
That is terrifying.
What I want to know
Truly
is,
terrifying. Truly.
Hold on. Is there a photo of...
one of the kids, right?
Yes. Yeah. Let's look that up. Okay. All right. Here's a photo. Side-by-side comparison of John DeFeo.
I mean, that's terrifying. If that is actually a ghost photo of a little kid, it's really scary. I mean, the eyes
hair.
are crazy. It's crazy.
Look at the hair.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And that's
crazy.
And this is the 1970s. There's not
Like Photoshop.
Yeah. And you could see his full body. Like you see him stood behind you can see the outline of his body behind the railing.
Yeah, it's really scary.
Wow. What a trip. That's wild.
It's really scary.
Yeah.
If I saw that in a photo, if I took that photo and saw that afterwards, I would just be like, I mean, that is...
No, I'd be like, put a fork in me, I'm done.
Yeah. And I'm a psychic medium, right? Things still unnerve me. It makes me feel like, ugh. So, look, I mean, again, I do believe it's entirely possible that the spirits of these kids are in the home. There's a ton of psychic imprinting. I truly believe that Lorraine would have seen that imagery in her mind. It makes complete sense to me. Completely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, in conclusion, where are you at with this case? Do you think the Lutzes, because there is, I mean... We have to acknowledge the inconsistencies and controversies around the Amityville case.
Of course.
We would be brutalized if we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
There is speculation that George Lutz bought the house when he knew he couldn't afford it. They stayed there for a month, came up with this story that the place was haunted and demons and ghosts and Satan and all that as a way to make some kind of insurance claim to get his money back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
As a psychic medium, I would say this. I would be surprised if they didn't feel anything at all after moving into that house. The amount of psychic imprinting from that tragedy, I think, has to be really, really intense. I'm not surprised that Lorraine went in and had a bunch of experiences and saw the kids and saw the murders and felt these energies. That to me makes a whole lot of sense, completely. I think that the spirits of the kids and the family could absolutely be there. I think there is hype around some of the other stuff, right? Like I don't know. It's like... It's not all bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all BS. I do think that Danny had experiences. I do think that the family, probably heard some knocking. They're probably, the sleep paralysis, stuff like that. But I don't know. It's hard for me to say demon. I wasn't there. Let's talk about the Conjuring house, right? Just as an example, right? So the Conjuring, those movies are terrifying. I actually know one of the children that grew up in the Conjuring house, and she will say the movie was so sensationalized. We lived in the home for several years. Some of the activity happens, but it wasn't like the movie, right? I think it's the same thing with the Amityville case. But I think what's doing everyone a disservice is when they make everything so demonic and so scary and they blow everything up, it's really hard for skeptics to even believe any of it. It's hard for people to buy that any of it actually happened because we don't know what's what. And, you know, all of these movies have made a ton of money. They're really entertaining. They're terrifying. And for those of us who really do believe in the paranormal and have had experiences, I think it has a negative impact on us. And Danny, poor Danny, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point. So, where are the Lutzes today? George and Kathy Lutz divorced in 1980. Kathy died of emphysema in 2004. And George passed away from heart disease in 2006. Now, the children, they have lived relatively private lives. Danny did participate in a documentary in 2013 where he confirmed everything and said it was all true. Nothing was made up. Like, that stuff did happen. The most interesting member of the family, though, for me, is Missy. She has never commented publicly about any of it. And I'm curious as to why. You know, that's an interesting experience to have and to not say a damn thing.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? People, like, maybe she doesn't want to be in the public eye. Maybe she knows that some of it was fabricated. Maybe she doesn't want people to think she's crazy. It could be a million different stories in there, right? It could be for a number of reasons.
Yeah. Maybe she's just a private person, too.
Yeah. I mean, look, in doing research about this case, it was challenging for me because there is a lot of evidence to show that there were fabrications.
Yeah.
But as a psychic medium, I have to look at these pieces and try to understand what could possibly have happened. Could there have been paranormal activity and why? And with all of the things that occurred in the home before they moved in, I truly believe that there could have been, you know, a lot of energy and a lot of activity.
Sure, yeah.
Especially kids, they're so open. Again, children are so tapped in. So children will see full body apparitions and adults won't see the same thing. And children will be like, hey, I saw grandma. And the parents are like, what do you mean? Grandma died before you were born. And the parents will hold a picture up and say, which one? And they're like, that's her. So kids see these spirits a lot. Yeah. That's why I'm really, careful to say that a child didn't see something or that the child is lying, because I truly believe that that is possible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think we wrap this up.
Yeah.
You know, Amityville Horror is a legendary story. They're probably going to make another 10 movies of it in the next 20 years. So be on the lookout, folks. I would love to go investigate that.
I would love to.
I think it would be amazing.
I do too.
With that being said, folks, thanks for watching. If you're a Patreon subscriber, please stick around. If you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast, please make sure you follow, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We can't do this without you, so the more support we have, the more followers we have, the more money we get, and the more shows we can produce. So, it's all on your shoulders. No, I'm just kidding. Teasing. Anyway, thank you very much. Cindy, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, Patreon folks, we have some bonus questions, so please make sure you stick around.
As we bid farewell to the haunted halls of Amityville, we are reminded that some nightmares never truly fade. The terror that unfolded within those walls serves as a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. Let us carry the echoes of Amityville with us as a cautionary tale, A reminder that evil can manifest in the most unexpected of places. And may we never forget that sometimes the true horror lies not within the shadows, but within ourselves.